Hi, I'm Cheryl Kagan, very proud to be the Senator for Gaithersburg and Rockville. Welcome to this week's edition of Kibbitzing with Kagan. My very special guest this week is at-large Montgomery County Councilmember Evan Glass. Mr. Councilmember, thank you so much for taking the time to chat.
Well, I'm so glad to be here, Senator Kagan. It is good to be with you and all your viewers.
Yay. So let's start with your childhood and your background. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, I grew up on Long Island, New York, in an original Levitt house. For those of you who know American suburban history, so Levitt homes were the original suburbs outside of New York where my parents grew up. And my parents got divorced when I was young. And so it was just my mother and me in our house. And my mom worked two jobs to provide for me. So I was home alone a lot, watched a lot of television, and, went to temple, went to soccer practice. And basically everything that I was able to do as a kid was because of the network that my mother had built around me. It was my neighbors, my classmates' parents, members of temple, other people who really built my village. And so that is kind of who I am and why I recognize the importance of community and of relationships. And it's what has guided me throughout all my adult life.
Yeah, well, we are blessed to have you building community here. But you started in journalism. Why don't you talk about your history at CNN and how that informed your view of politics and policy?
So when my mother was working her second job, I was home watching TV, and it was during the advent of cable news. And I remember watching the first Gulf War and thinking how incredible it was to watch conflict or watch anything happen live on the other side of the earth. And I loved journalism. I loved the public support that it provided, the public benefit that it gave to people. And so I came down to Washington, D.C., studying journalism and political science. And I lucked into a very entry-level job at CNN where I was a researcher. Pre-Google, I did a lot of Google things, inputting things into databases, watching lots of videos. And I stayed there for 12 years. And during that time, rose through the ranks and became a producer covering Capitol Hill, presidential politics, and just national politics. And it was a wonderful front row seat to history. Traveled the country, but at the same time recognized how important our community was. And after 12 years, I left to do other things.
So you pivoted to the nonprofit sector, and I first knew you with the Gandhi Brigade. So why don't you talk about your tenure there, since nonprofits are such a huge passion for you and for me?
So in 2014, the executive director and founder of this organization called Gandhi Brigade Youth Media suddenly passed away.
So
and this organization, Richard Jaggi was a dear friend of mine. Wonderful, wonderful visionary man who really wanted our youth voices to be heard. And I was asked to become the executive director of this organization, where I had volunteered my time while I was at CNN. And basically the organization helps young people learn digital media and creative arts to express themselves. And a lot of the work is social justice oriented. Most of the kids are immigrant or first generation. Many are Black and brown, and they come from mostly the northern part of the county and the eastern part of the county. And for the 4 years I was the executive director, put my heart and soul into it, expanded the programs, and opened up a brand new facility in the Silver Spring Library. And after I left, the contractors were done, and there was about a 2,500 square foot facility in the lower level of the Silver Spring Library, which this organization now calls home, where kids can go safely after school and dabble and learn about the creative arts.
Fantastic. So you decided to run for office, and why don't you talk about what inspired you to do that and your experience on the campaign trail?
So while I was at CNN, I had moved from a group house in Bethesda to downtown Silver Spring because it was affordable. And while I was walking back and forth to the metro back in the early aughts, I recognized that the sidewalks were crumbling and there was no safe way to cross East-West Highway, a state highway. And I thought to myself, I know how Congress works. I know how the federal government works, but who do I talk to about fixing my own sidewalks? And I met with a bunch of neighbors over coffee, and we formed a neighborhood association. They selected me to be president, and we started making our neighborhood better. And all of a sudden we got better pedestrian crossings, and we started making our streets safer, working with Montgomery County Police Department and doing all these little things that are really integral to community building and neighborly relations. And when I left CNN, it was colleagues of yours in the General Assembly, people like Rich Madalino, people like Heather Mazier, who reached out to me and said, you know, we want to make marriage equality law here in the state of Maryland. And we're trying to rebuild the Equality Maryland Board, a nonprofit, the largest LGBTQ rights organization at the time in the state. And we'd love for you to be part of that effort. And while I was now free from the shackles of objective journalism, I could say I'm a gay man, I support marriage equality, and I can get politically involved. Yes. And so I did. And on election night, had I still been at CNN, I would have been at Mitt Romney's presidential headquarters in November of 2012, but instead I was at the Marriage Equality Victory Party with my husband in Baltimore, which was a way better party.
Way better. That's so great. So continue, please. You're running, you're becoming a candidate.
Well, and so I started getting more involved, and folks started asking me to get more involved and to help out their campaigns. And then in 2014, former Montgomery County Councilmember Valerie Irvin made it known that she was not running for re-election. And I was encouraged to run for her seat in the Silver Spring, Tacoma Park area. District 5. And I had never knocked on a door before. I had never done anything really campaign oriented, but I embarked on that adventure and knocked on thousands of doors. And at the end of the primary, I lost by 1%. And so we were like, okay, now I know what I'm doing. And 4 years later, when there were openings in the at-large race, I hopped in and joined a field of 33 people and came in the top 4.
Well, glad you did. Was it harder to be a first-time candidate, a gay man, or Jewish?
Oh, well, that is a very interesting question. I think being a candidate is probably the hardest because as a gay man, I didn't come out until after college. And it was a long process for me, first figuring out if my friends and family would accept me, first figuring out the emotions I was feeling as a person. But then when I came out, I recognized that my friends are my friends and they will love me for who I am, as will my family. And being a person of Jewish faith, that's been imbued in me my entire life. But being a candidate is a strange thing. And to talk to people at their homes, to go up to people and just asking them questions and shaking their hand and then raising money and doing everything a campaign has to do is a learning curve. And here we are all these years later. I've learned a lot.
Before we pivot to your council career, have you experienced homophobia, anti-Semitism in a way that's been unexpected?
I certainly have. And, you know, there have been times where my husband and I are on a public bus and we're sitting next to each other, and clearly we love each other, right? And without, you know, necessarily public displays of affection, people recognized we were gay, and we've had slurs thrown at us. And you and others might recall when I first got elected and raised the pride flag in Rockville, there were a lot of people who didn't like that. And the vitriol was so fierce that my council office, we had to stop answering our phones for 3 days because the nastiness, not only from people in Maryland, but from around the country, thank you, Twitter, was vicious. And so I've felt it at various points in my life, you know, a topic for another time, but when I was a journalist, I covered the Republicans running for president. And, you know, when Mike Huckabee, no liberal by any regard, asked me, you know, if I was in a relationship while we were in Iowa. We were traveling in Iowa? And I said, I was. And he said, well, she must really miss you. I'm not going to start getting into a debate with the former preacher, Mike Huckabee, about the status of my relationship. So it's had its twists and turns, but we prevail and we continue spreading love and light wherever we go.
Thank you. So you are an at-large council member, which means unlike the 5 in-district folks, the current 4, we have 9, but we're shifting to 11, but you traveled the entire county, served the entire county. And if I can just opine that you promised me when you were elected 4 years ago, or when you were running 4 years ago, that you would make it to Gaithersburg, you would come to Rockville, you would make it to the Up County and focus on our issues. And you have kept that commitment. Talk about the challenges and the burden of trying to be everywhere in a county of over 1 million people.
Oh my gosh, Montgomery County is a huge jurisdiction, 500 square miles, 1.1 million people. And I think there's probably about 1.1 million ideas as to how to improve our community. And I truly love it because as a former journalist, I really enjoy listening to people, actively listening to them. And so when I'm in Silver Spring and Tacoma Park, I might hear one opinion. When I'm in Bethesda, Rockville, Gaithersburg, Germantown, Olney, I enjoy those conversations and recognizing the incredible diverse needs that we have. And when I first announced or decided I was going to run for council at large, my husband and I had to get a second car. We only had one car in our household, and there was no way for me to be able to travel everywhere by taking the metro or the bus itself. Right. And so my odometer clearly shows I get around as much as I can, but it is a beautiful county. And my husband continues to be surprised when I tell him about restaurants or good places to eat and places he might not have ever been. He's like, how do you know about that place? I said, I'm an at-large member of the council.
Darn right. So my interns and staff helped me prepare for these interviews. And one of them came up with a great question, which is, over the last 4 years, tell us something that you've learned about yourself and something you've learned about the county that you didn't know earlier.
So that is a really good question. Kudos to your interns for this. Yep. So what I've learned about myself is that it is incredibly important in public service and in life to be true to yourself. And that has been my motto when I came out, being true to myself. But I think it's ever more important when you're an elected official so that people know what you stand for. People know that they can have confidence in you and trust in you, building those relationships. And while you might not always agree on a policy or on a position, there should be no disagreement about the character of that individual. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's really hard in politics. People can easily lose themselves. They, can get distracted for a variety of reasons, but we have to remember why we're here, trying to help our neighbors, our residents, and it's so incredibly important to stay focused. And I'll tell you, yoga does help. I found yoga during the pandemic when I was home alone a lot, and I continue doing it, and it helps center me.
Great. And something you've learned about the county?
Well, I shared that in my previous response. We are a huge, diverse county, and people think that Montgomery County's streets are paved with gold because we are a wealthy community. People think that because every elected official in the county is a Democrat, that there is a continuity of thought, but we are hugely diverse. We have tremendous pockets of poverty, and people need to recognize that.
You referenced COVID, the pandemic, and there's a lot that Montgomery County did right, and there's a lot that I suspect we would want to do differently if we had the opportunity to rewind the clock. Why don't you give us an example of one of each of those?
So, really complicated question, quite frankly, because hindsight is 20/20, and we want to make sure ultimately that everybody was healthy and safe. And we know that in many measures, our community has been one of the safest in the country. And that is a testament to the county government setting up facilities and making sure that there are mobile testing sites in communities where they lack proper access to transit. But it is more a testament to the incredibly smart people that you and I represent, who they didn't need us to tell them to get vaccinated. Nearly every single person in our community got vaccinated on their own accord. And that is why we're healthy and safe. And while there might have been things that we could have done differently, I think the more important question is, how do we move forward? And I think the more important focus should be on making sure that we remain a fair and equitable community where access to healthcare is available to everybody. And when we saw that there were communities that didn't have cars, that they worked multiple jobs and couldn't get to the library or the rec center, we went to them. And that there were certain schools and facilities that needed some upgrades to be able to maybe open some windows or eat outside. And so we accommodated MCPS and helped them in those ways. So we have to be mindful of the inequities that existed, but double down on our efforts to close the gaps moving forward. I think that's the more important lesson.
Makes sense. You and I have worked together on several issues, including pay equity. You came to Annapolis to testify on my bill, and we did get something even stronger passed, which was amazing. And you and my council member, District 3 council member, Sidney Katz, and I have worked together with Delegate Jared Solomon on gender neutral bathrooms for single stall bathrooms. Talk about how you collaborate with legislators, because you are a little bit unusual that way.
Well, I love community, and community is very closely associated with collaboration, people coming together, because here in Maryland and Montgomery County, it is a unique system where the county and county council, quite frankly, we have a lot of power. We're probably one of the most powerful legislative bodies that I am aware of, being the Board of Health, having zoning authority, having final budgetary authority, the ability to rip up the budget and rewrite it if we wanted to. And while all that might be true, there are still things that we can't control. And we do live in a large state, and the state does control a number of levers. And so working with you and working with others to not only allow us in Montgomery County to be at the fore of equity and fairness, but quite frankly, as goes Montgomery County, oftentimes goes Maryland, and it might take a little while to get there.
Yes.
But we have to lead the way and show everybody else that it's okay, right? That public financed elections, which started in Maryland, in Montgomery County, because the legislature granted that authority, that's a good thing. We're going to get ranked choice voting with your help, I'm sure. We're going to get, we got pay equity throughout the state, which started here in Montgomery County. Yep. And there's more to do, like gender neutral bathrooms for single stall facilities. And so I look forward to continuing those projects with you. I know you and I offline talk a lot about this upcoming legislative session, and so I look forward to getting to work on that too.
Good. So those are just a couple of the issues that we've worked on. Tell me what you're proudest of accomplishing your first term.
My very first piece of legislation, which you referenced, is the Montgomery County Pay Equity Act. And as the son of a mother who worked 2 jobs, I know how hard people struggle, particularly women and women of color struggle. And to be able to help bend the curve here in Montgomery County, seeing and calling out the unfair hiring practices that exist even here in Montgomery County, and trying to do right for people. Incredibly important, incredibly personal for me. I'm also really proud of my efforts to improve our public transportation system. Yes. As someone who rides the bus and takes the metro as often as I can, when I made our buses free for all kids all the time, youth ridership increased 57%. And as we talk about this changing climate and clogged roads, we need to find alternatives, and transit equity is something that's at the fore of my mind. And the buses used to cost $2. Now they only cost $1. And I'm going to continue pushing until they're free, because I think that also is going to help people where they are at. And when we have bus riders whose families make one third of the household income of the average resident, we provide a lot of services. and provide a lot of assistance to some of these families. But sometimes we just need to meet people where they are. And in this case, it's at the bus stop. And so we got more to do, but those two things I am most proud of in my first term, and look forward to doing more in a second term.
Fabulous. I have so many questions I want to ask you. What do you believe is, no, I'm not going to. What would your legislative priority be in a second term?
So next year, there is going to be an expanded council. We're going from 9 members to 11 members, as you mentioned earlier. And that was a charter amendment that I introduced, trying to expand democracy. Here in Montgomery County, our 9-member council has been in existence for 30 years, yet our population has increased 50%. So unlike other jurisdictions, we here are expanding representation and expanding democracy. And so part of what I think we need to do is make sure that the council is working cohesively to achieve the priorities of our community. And I'm currently serving as vice president. I'll say that traditionally, the vice president becomes president the following year, traditionally.
Okay.
And so I look forward to working with all of our new members and returning members to have a cogent vision, working with whomever the executive is, whomever the governor is, and we got to get a Democratic governor back in the governor's house.
Yes.
But while those are not legislative, they are so critically important to having a good legislative policy priority, making sure that we all work as Team Montgomery.
So I'm going to give you the opportunity to make news here if you're inclined. I don't believe you have endorsed a candidate for a county executive yet. Is that something you might like to do here?
I am a strong supporter of Tom Perez to be the next Democratic governor. I know you and I have different opinions.
Westmore, go Westmore.
But we're all on Team Democrat here, and I will support whomever the Democratic nominee is. But I agree with the Washington Post, the Baltimore Sun, and others in supporting Tom Perez for county executive. I am not endorsing anyone for county executive, nor am I endorsing anyone for the county council, because I will need to work with everybody to get us on a good track for the future. But I will say this, we need more women on the county council. Right now, we only have Nancy Navarro, and she is a tour de force. I enjoy working with her, but 1 out of 9 is not sufficient representation. And as we grow to 11, I am hopeful that the voters of Montgomery County elect more women to the council.
Yes. So go Marilyn Balcom, go Kate Stewart. So not a lot of choices in the at-large, but the in-district, the district with Jacqueline Manger and Dawn Lutke, the district with Mary Say Morales and Natalie Fanny Gonzalez. And there's so many talented women running in the districts. And so hopefully that'll—
A lot of talented women running for council. Absolutely.
Running for council. All right. So, so just one more question before we go to our Fast Five, which is make a pitch for a nonprofit organization, since that's part of your passion and your history, a nonprofit organization that you support personally.
Well, I'm going to go back to Gandhi Brigade Youth Media, which continues to expand our work. And in this day and age, where the Supreme Court and other national powers that be are trying to roll back our rights, roll back our civil liberties, and take us to another time and another century, it is so important that everybody's voices are elevated, and especially those of our youth and youth of color. And so I'd encourage people to learn more about Gandhi Brigade Youth Media and how we can support our kids. Great.
Do you want to briefly talk about anything that we haven't discussed?
No, you've done a thorough job of asking lots of good questions.
Okay. Well, then Councilmember Evan Glass, Fast Five quick questions to let folks know a little bit more about you. Question number 1, who inspires you?
Who inspires me? The memory of my mother inspires me. Seeing the hard work, dedication, and unconditional love that she had for me. Those are traits that I try and instill upon others. And that's, the golden rule: treat others as you'd have them treat you. And that's how I go by my daily life.
Great. Question 2. Again, this was an intern idea. If you had 1 extra hour every day, how would you spend it?
Well, I talked about finding yoga. I don't always have time for yoga or maybe the gym. But I'll tell you this. So when I walk my dog around my neighborhood, my neighbors see me and they actually leave me alone. And they've told me, almost all my neighbors, that they know that's probably the only alone time I have. I'm listening to a podcast. So maybe a little more alone time, or actually more alone time with my husband, who I don't always get to see. Yeah.
Yeah. Question 3. What's a movie you've seen multiple times that just never gets old?
Oh my gosh. Movie that I can watch nonstop is The Breakfast Club. And yeah, John Hughes, Molly Ringwald,
Yeah.
1980s, 5 different people who come from different walks of lives and don't think that they have anything in common. Comedy ensues, and they realize that they have a lot in common, and they might speak with different ways, different languages, essentially, but all we have to do is talk to each other for a little bit, be forced into a space, and we can learn so much about each other and learn about ourselves.
Fantastic. Question 4. What is some advice you would give to someone who's thinking about starting a career in politics?
Oh my gosh. Well, try other things first, right? Start a life and find a job and get engaged in civic life, in nonprofit life, volunteer on a campaign, and then see if it's something that you still like. Because I think all too often young people will automatically hop into politics or think that's what they want to do, and then they work on a campaign or they run themselves and realize it's very different than what they see in the movies or what they thought it was. But I think what's even more important is having real world experiences outside of politics that help make your politics more informed. And so just be a student of life, get involved in something that you care about, and see if it evolves.
Love it. That's great advice. And the last question, Councilmember Evan Glass. What is your hidden secret superpower? What is a skill or talent you have, something you're really good at that most folks can't do?
Listening. I think so many people say they're good listeners, but they're simply nodding their head. And in a conversation, they will then just pick up and talk about whatever they want to talk about. And I think being an active listener, which for me is instilled in me from being a journalist for a dozen years, you really hear people. And sometimes people don't know what they want to say, but if you're an active listener, you understand them anyway. And I think in this world of politics, people come to us with problems, but they can't necessarily articulate what the problem might be or how to fix it. But as you listen to them and engage with them, we can find a solution.
Love it. Love it. Thank you. Councilmember Evan, thank you for all that you do for our county. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for being with me today. I am proud to be your friend and ally and supporter and cheering you on for a second term, and who knows what'll come beyond.
Well, thank you very much, Cheryl, Senator Kagan. I appreciate our collaboration. I know we have many more things that we're going to do together to make residents of Montgomery County and Maryland better. So thank you for this opportunity. I enjoyed the chat.
Absolutely. See you soon.
Cheers.